Shouldn't be in school libraries. Certainly not for the age group if they're in elementary and they're too mature. To emails that had 100 books from school libraries that a parent had gone through and taken passages out of and illustrations to show me that the schools in his district were filled with pornography. I have to say that I am opposed to this bill because I think it might do damage. I think we have policies in place that can handle this, and I think there's a little bit of hysteria about what's addressing all these so-called pornographic books in our school libraries. Thank you. Setting up districts for lawsuits by taking out these passages out of context?
No, not at all. In the PICO case, the judges there said specifically, if it's vulgar, if it's pornographic, clearly they can take those materials out. And so it doesn't set them up for lawsuits, and it's not out of context, and it's not banning books.
Pornography, I think there are some books that should be removed. I've seen some of them. There are maybe a few dozen, but
and just to wrap up, the chair did direct me to, I shared some legal advice to several legislators, and including the chairs, and it was directed to sort of share it with the committee, that there are criminal penalties, both state and federal, for duplicating, producing, distributing, displaying child pornography, and similarly penalties for exposing a minor to pornography. Okay, so there's no component of intent, and we could.
I just have one question for you, and that is, which is one of my main worries with this. When in this statute we've actually fully defined what it means to be pornographic, there actually is R277 is an education administration code, and this is rules of conduct, and it basically says that educators can be prosecuted, lose their license, and be fired for distributing pornography to students. Now that we have this clear line of what constitutes pornography, I think advice that's coming out from school districts that says, you have to have this long review process and other things may actually be sending the wrong signal to educators. And I worry that they're really complicit in keeping these books on the shelf if they do pass that clear line rule.
I guess what I would say is that the statute doesn't contemplate a grace period or any sort of safe harbor review process. It's you can't have sensitive material in the school. You can't provide it to minors. So if you do, you violated the statute.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not going to read the bad stuff, I promise. I will.
State your point of order. Your mic does not want to go on. No, I'm pushing it really hard.
Maybe it's somebody else.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we know where he's going with that. I don't want to hear that.
Representative Ivory, just if you can keep your comments.
And I will respond to the point that does that not make the point? Does that not make the point? This is a meeting of adults, for Pete's sakes.
I'm not here to debate. That was my point of order.
Okay, point of order has been stated. If you
and I would suggest that the arguments have been made that this should, and I promise I'll blank out.
Well, I think if we can, go ahead and just continue with your comments. But we know we've had a lot of the material sent to us, and we know how graphic it can be. So thank you. In terms of the trigger that's been referenced a lot today, it applies only to objective materials. That's materials that are criminally pornographic. It isn't banning books or book burning. We are removing criminal pornography that shouldn't be in our schools anyways. Anyway, I think that why this matters and why it's important is this is taxpayer-funded materials, and it's not just books in schools. It's also curriculum and other materials that are provided. So I think that's important. I also think it's important to note that if Davis, Jordan, and Granite were to be those three, that's the majority of students in our state.
I would. I think people have been waiting for a long time for some of these books to get removed, and this bill, the way it is now, takes those really bright lines, as you mentioned, the criminal pornography out, and I think people are past ready for that. One thing that the sponsor said in his opening, when he said it doesn't matter what county something is criminal in, it's criminal across the state. That makes sense to me. I think erring on the side of caution when it comes to the minds of our children is what we should be doing in this case. And as been said, that as parents, we have the right to do, they have the right to do what's best for their children. And if someone wants to get a book from another library or buy a book, then they can do that for their child. This is not banning books. This is removing them from state-funded institutions. So I support this fully.
To the good Representative Clancy, just rhetorically speaking, but thinking about you, how many people would it take to report a crime? To report arson or robbery or the molestation of a child? One, right? One. We're allowing for 3 districts to report material that is criminally indecent and pornographic. Has been since 2007. Parents, and they're distressed that there are materials in schools in the hundreds that are pornographic, so much so that our legislative attorneys have counseled me that I cannot share the materials or the images in these books on the floor of the House or in legislative committees without violating state and federal obscenity laws.
Thank you, Mr.